The same day every year, Iraqis gather to pay tribute to their president. The cult of personality has never before reached such a peak. Saddam Hussein has a totalitarian conception of power. Being a despot, he uses all the means he has at his disposal to reach his goal: popularity, exaggerated patriotism, and police terror. Nevertheless, the population of Baghdad seems to lead a normal life. In spite of the hardships a 12-year-long embargo and a non-existent democracy have imposed on them. Songs in praise of Saddam Hussein's glory can be heard in all public places. They punctuate the Iraqis' everyday life. The master of Baghdad has been governing the country with an iron hand for the past 30 years, miraculously escaping all the numerous plots hatched against him. What were the different stages of the long route this man, with an obscure past, took to conquer absolute power? The dice were cast when he launched himself into revolutionary militancy at the age of 19. After that, political activism was to nurture the dreams and ambition of young Saddam, who was born 19 years before and 160 kilometers away from Baghdad, in the small Tikrit village deep in the heart of Sunni Muslim Iraq. He spent his childhood in the austere tribal society, with strict codes. Its members were united by an unfailing faith in the traditional values of their clan. He was an orphan, and from a very young age showed a rebellious personality, as he was ill-treated by his stepfather, his mother's second husband, an uncouth and rough character. At the early stage of his political career, he relied on this complex family network, which was to help him in his battle towards power. Though the rural society in which Saddam Hussein was brought up was an archaic one, it was also affected by deep changes shaking Iraq since the end of World War I. In 1920, Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra, the three Mesopotamian provinces of the former Ottoman Empire, became a British protectorate. It was the beginning of modern Iraq, whose population formed an ethnic and religious mosaic of over 10 million inhabitants. 1 year later, the English offered the Iraqi throne to Faisal. Thus, political power was in the hands of a Sunni Arab elite, while the majority of the country's population was Shiite. In 1932, the British mandate was put to an end and independence was granted to Iraq. Nevertheless, they maintained their military force in this strategic crossroads on the road to India. In 1941, the English crushed a pro-German coup led by the historic figure of Arabic nationalism, Rashid Ali. Then, the Middle East was the hub of the British military forces as they faced Hitler's army, which was dangerously marching through Libya towards the Egyptian border, thus threatening the Suez Canal. After World War II, Great Britain, which had maintained its troops from the Suez Canal to the Persian Gulf, became the target of Arab nationalism. In Baghdad, in 1948, an anti-British demonstration was suppressed with bloodshed. A great number of Iraqi officers formed secret cells and spread the idea of a republic. It is during the troubled post-war period that Saddam Hussein would leave the tribal world of his childhood forever. At 10, he could neither read nor write, as his stepfather preferred his working in the fields to his attending school. This was the beginning of a heroic episode of Saddam Hussein's life. Indeed, 25 years later, when Saddam Hussein launched his major school project, this episode was related in the comic strip written by propaganda services for school children. From an early age, Saddam Hussein, our guide and president, showed an outstanding strength of character. Saddam Hussein, humiliated to be a poor, illiterate peasant, was determined to learn how to read and write. The young Saddam ran away from home and took refuge at some cousin's house. They gave him a gun to continue his journey, as the region was most unsafe. Saddam had just one thing in mind: to find refuge at his maternal uncle's home, Kaharala Tulfa, a nationalist officer. Saddam courageously and determinedly launched into his studies under the severe eye of this man steeped in ideals. A few years later, he followed his uncle to Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. It was a crucible of political unrest, nurtured by Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal, which represented an extraordinary challenge to the Western world. Nasser became the hero of the Arab world and of all developing countries. Egypt was also the first Arab country to interest the USSR for both its strategic location and its ideology with socialist leanings.